All right, we're back. We are MAPD124 in the winter 2017 semester, week 10, part 1 of our broadcast here at Centennial. And just continue with what we did last week. We were building a game for Sprite Kit. We didn't quite get done with the stuff I was going to do. And I'm going to continue that this week. We're going to add some sounds. We're going to do a bunch of different things like that to make the game work. Now, so I'm going to talk about your assignment number 3. Which is going to be worth, again, 20% of your final grade. Let's take a look at it so we can see what's the stuff that we're doing. Again, this course is laid out a little differently than some of the other ones, but it is what it is. All right, so here's assignment 3. So we've been talking about this game, and I'm going to get you to build one. You're going to build a slot machine. Right, so you're going to build a kind of a gambling kind of game, right? Going with what you talked about in the last class, I guess, with Shemik's class, and he talked about this, his gambling app. Now, this one will not actually ask you to, spend your money, right? But of course, it can always be converted into something like that if you really want to. That's not my thing. I don't make gambling apps, but I do done this slot machine. This is another Hello World that I use across platforms. So I can do a slot machine in this version and something with C++ and Python and different languages. I've done the same application, and again, it's just so that you can familiarize yourself with the framework, right? So now there's a choice between this one and doing some kind of shooter game, some kind of shooter like I was going to show you, but I've already shown you the shooter, so this one will be another one that you can do. And it'll be a little easier because you can use some of the same interface options that you've already seen, but you're going to be using Sprite Kit, right, as opposed to UI Kit. Okay, so what do you need to build? What is this thing? So you're going to add these. So see, first of all, what is a slot machine? Most of you should know what it is. They look like this, right? These are like the digital versions that you might have seen already, right? Now, again, it won't look exactly like this because you're going to make it fit for what you're going to do with iOS, right? So it's got to fit into a screen. Now, to me, I'm only going to ask you to make it for iPhone, right? Again, there'll be bonus marks if you want to translate this to work with other devices as well. This assignment is for you and a partner, right? So one person that you can work with on this one. So it's not a solo assignment. If you want to make it solo assignment, you can, but it doesn't make any sense. And because you're already in groups or teams, pick someone from the team that you're already with. Like try and pick someone that you're already working with. Don't pick somebody you don't know if they're going to help you or going to work on it or whatever. That doesn't make any sense. So if you know someone that you're very comfortable working with, pick that person. But if you really want to and you want to learn, there's a lot of learning here involved. So if you want to do this completely on your own, that's up to you as well. You can do that. All right, so again, you're building an interface that looks like this. Next week, I'm going to check your interface. One of the labs I'm going to do next week, I'm going to come around and say, show me your interface. Just be prepared because I'm going to do that and check to see if you've gotten started on your work. Okay. So again, if you notice what the slot machine image looked like, you're going to build a UI with 3 reels. It's almost like little windows where the fruits or whatever the images are going to come down. That's what you're building, right? And they're going to have a default. There's going to be a default image, right? For let's say that says spin or something like that, if you want to, right? When the UI initially loads, and then the images in the reels will change every time the user presses the spin button. So there'll be a spin button. You're going to press on that button, and then it's going to spin the reels of the slot machine. Now remember, there's some really good examples. I'm going to give you some assets as well. One thing I forgot to do is online. I forgot to put up the assets. I'll put them up later on after this video. But if you want to look at slot machine for iOS, right? And if you want to look at some of the images that are out there for some slot machine games, you can certainly look at these for some inspiration, right? No, not that one, but definitely look at some of these ones because at the end of the day, you might get an idea of things that might work. I'm just going to pick one randomly here. So this might be the size of an iPhone device. You can see that there might be a spin button there, and there's going to be some kind of it could be fruits, it could be images of whatever you want to choose. My recommendation is you and your partner should pick a theme. So if you want to make it so it's fruits, you can pick fruits. If you want to make it so that it is, you know, spaceships or whatever, it's got to make sense though. And you got to know that you lost. Okay, so you can't make something that you look at and go, well, you lost. Well, how do I know I lost? It's got to show me that, you know, if it's spaceships, maybe it's an explosion that says lose, you know, something like that, or hit, you know, whatever, something that makes sense for the slot machine that you're making. This is something that I want you to learn from. So it's going to be, you know, what I do not want you to use, if at all possible, right, any user interface elements from UIKit. Okay, so it's not for that. It's not. That's not the exercise here. It's using Sprite Sheet to make all this stuff happen. Okay, and the great thing about that is you'll understand how to make things interfaces from scratch, as opposed to making interfaces with UIKit. Okay. Once you understand how to do those kind of things, then you can make a lot of different kinds of special effects and so on. That's why I'm getting you to do this. That's what the exercise is. All right, so that's what you're building. Let's take a look at some more of the details. We're going to go here. So again, so you've got these 3 reels, 3 little windows. Go back to that image that I just pulled down. 3 little windows, 1, 2, 3, right? That's an example. And then when you press the spin button, right, these things were animated. Notice that there's these little lines here. I'm only expect these are bet lines, right? So this is how you win. So you can win diagonally in this case. I'm not asking you to do this. I'm only asking you to do like a horizontal line. So the image that you see here in the horizontal are the only ones that will allow you to win. Okay, so if you want to add additional bet lines, you can, but it's not required. Okay, so you don't have to do bet lines in different angles, right? Make sure that this, you know, that your slot machine makes sense too. You know, the buttons have to be touchable. They can't be too small, right? Everything that you're going to have, the score and everything has to be viewable. So make sure when you design your design your interface that everything is as it should be from an interface design perspective. Remember that with me, every time you build something, I want wireframes. I want you to use your UI UX experience to build something. So that's what I'm saying. That's why it takes a couple people. I don't want to take you away from doing your project. It's not what I want you to do. I want this to be a fun exercise as opposed to something that's going to make you sweat. Okay, if it's not for that. So you need a spin button, like it says here. Now I'm not going to tell you how to you know put it together. You have to create one of this spin button. You're on your own. So how do you do buttons, right? There's different ways of doing this, by the way. Some of them you can actually make an image that you, when you touch the image, a touchable area, touch on the image, and then it you know kind of pulls up, you know, whatever the functionality you want. So some kind of button control in your UI that allows the user to reset the game. So I want to reset, right? A button control that allows you to quit the game. Okay, this is interesting because this would basically put you back to some kind of start screen, you know, and I recommend having maybe a simple start screen that says start with a button, right? You know, those kind of things. Labels or some other controls that display the user's money, the current jackpot, and the current bet, right? Again, please, if you don't understand what a slot machine is or how it works, you got to talk to me because, and again, depending on the culture, you may have never done it, may have not have access or interest, right? So that's perfectly fine. Ensure that the user enters a bet amount in the bet entry control. So again, if you go back to that control, you know, notice that the bet amounts you're going to dial up, right? You're not going to be able to dial in. You're not going to enter in a value by yourself with your finger, like 3, all right? You want to kind of make sure the user validates their data. So if they're going to enter stuff that makes sense, so they're not going to be able to you can't allow them to enter letters for a bet. It's only going to be numbers, and you're probably going to spin them up or have a series of buttons on the control that allows them to pick the bet, okay? So that's where it's going to go from here. Include conditions that allow the player to potentially win the jackpot, and you can use the example code provided. Now, what is this example code provided? It's based on JavaScript. It's not that difficult. It's still functionality. I'm going to show you what it looks like. I want you to take that JavaScript, translate it to Swift. This is one of the exercises you have to do, right? Which, by the way, is very simple to translate. We'll talk about it. I'll show it to you what it looks like. But the code is almost translatable. You can almost take that code and dump it right into Swift, and it's ready to go. Like, it's that simple. So we'll talk about it. So it's not how to code, you know, how to do the whole calculation, how you win and all that stuff. Why, you know, bother thinking about that? I've kind of provided a little bit of a code base for you, so it's not that difficult. And by the way, I've put it up on eCentennial for you already, that the web app. Make sure you have a slot machine graphic that gives you the interface, the look and feel. So on the background of the interface, remember we talked about how do you do a scrolling ocean last week and different layers. On the background, what I want you to do is put some kind of slot machine graphic that sits in the back to make it look like a slot machine. But on the front, use all your user controls, all your buttons and everything else sit on top of that, right? So that's how you do that. Internal documentation for sure, like we normally do in terms of your commenting and your comment headers and all that stuff. I'm looking for those things. And then an external document that's a game document, really. It's like a game design document in this case, but I want you to have a company logo, table of contents, your version history. So, point to GitHub, please. A detailed description of what you're making, how the slot machine works, right? Gameplay mechanics. So how does this work? How does it, when I press the button, like describe your slot machine a little bit. So you and your partner can do that. Several interface sketches. Obviously you want to make it so you kind of design what your slot machine is going to look like. Screenshots of your game, right? What it looks like from a screenshot perspective. How do you score? So show me images that show me your pattern. Is it going to be fruits, like I'm showing you, or is it going to be spaceships, or what's your theme for your slot machine? And then, kind of detail where you got your images and assets from, your slot, kind of a little an index, almost like a graph of where you've got all your images and what they mean, and any kind of sounds and where they came from, right? So kind of detail those things in your document. Make sure you share it up on GitHub, right, for version control best practices, okay? And then it says here to share it on cloud. There are ways of sharing it on the cloud, even for iOS, but we're not going to get there. Now, someone asked me, what is it like? Can I use, in previous iterations where I've done this thing before for iOS, they asked me, can I use Unity? And the answer is not for this one. This one is a no. It's a hard no for Unity. So you can't use Unity for this one. I want you to use Sprite Sheet, like, kind of lower level, means of how to do this. There's not a lot of thinking here. I'm not asking you to like recreate reinvent your own wheel or whatever, or try and make a whole other app. That's not the exercise here. Okay, it's not like I'm asking you to make a whole new thing that's never been made before. Slot machines, there are hundreds of slot machines on the App Store that you can buy. Any kind of betting app, like there's tons of them. I'm not asking you to make something new here. It's just trying to get you to understand the interface, right? Here's some bonus options. Slot machine activates sound clips. So the one I'm asking you to build doesn't require any sounds. I'm just making you make the interface, right? So it works. It's functional, is what I want you to know, right? So if you add like sounds and all that stuff when you hit the buttons and when it spins, bonus points. A few bonus points for that. An animation effect for the reels. So right now, all I want you to do for the reels is just flip them. So just do one of those. So it just flips. When you press the button, it just changes the image. They just pop up. Okay? They don't animate. I'm not asking you to do any kind of animation. If you do animation with your partner and you figure that out, bonus points. Include more reels. So instead of 3 reels, you want to do 5, or you want to do something weird, that's fine. Just let me know how it works. And then more bet lines. Right now, the only bet line I want is the horizontal one that goes across, like the 3 reels in a row. Was that? Just the middle one. But if you want to make it this way as well somehow, that's a whole other coding fest you're going to have to do with that one. And if you got time for that, all the power. I don't know anyone who has that time, but I want to give you some ideas of how to get bonus points. Okay, that's what it is. That's why this is there. And again, I showed you some examples, but these are what they look like, digital slot machines, what you can use to create your own. I didn't want to kind of color your perception, even though I included this one, like this. I'm just looking at this one. But this could be one interface, but there's many, many other options here to make this work, right? And again, if you wanted to make one for iPad or something, not this one, if you want to make it work for iPad or something, it's totally cool. Again, the challenge here is getting image assets. And again, like I said, I'm going to put them up on eCentennial, and I'll just do that right now. So I don't forget, because I got a bunch of them for you guys. Right, so that way you don't have to build. I'm not asking you to build it originally. It's just exercising your skills on how to use Sprite Sheet. And it's not a difficult one, because with the stuff I'm building with you guys, when it comes to moving things around the screen and firing bullets and all that kind of stuff, that's more difficult, far more difficult than what I'm asking you to do here, right? This is much more straightforward. which is really why I'm doing this, right? So what I wanted to do was include some more assets, which is, of course, cancel. It's not what I wanted. I wanted to add a file. There we go. And I have my assets for you, but I need to zip this up. So I'm going to just compress it. There we go. There we go. So I've even given you the assets. All right. So if you want to, just use my assets. I'm okay with that. Now, if you're working alone, that's a great kind of an option, just to make what I've given you, right? And I'll look at those assets in a second because I want to explain the assignment a little bit. But let's say you're working with a partner and you want to make your own, which might be good learnings for you guys. That's fine too. So think about how you can incorporate those. I'll look at my assets in a second. Let's keep reading this stuff. So that's part of it. So again, it's worth 20% of your grade. So you need an external document. Please make sure you do that. That's your proof of concept, if you will, that kind of stuff. Your planning. Very simple. Don't make it so complex. Again, it just has to be kind of a few pages. If you want me, I can give you a game design document as well. I don't mind. I'll just put another document, a template that you fill out. All right, so you don't have to go too crazy. And I'm not expecting you to. Like, I'm not. This isn't. This doesn't make the students crazy week. All right. This is just getting you to learn some of these things. Let me just get into this stuff here, and I'll grab the document that I usually use for this, which is here. It is. So put that up there too. Let's get back to this for a second, and we'll point to that. Sorry. Nope. Not what I wanted. I want to do it here. Sorry about that. Yay. And we'll add that in there. So that should give you, like I said, everything you need to do your project. Okay. So let's take a look at a couple things before I go on to the actual stuff here. Let's just keep going. So if I was going to look at the example project I give you, first of all, let's take a look at the images that I've given you, right? I've also given you a texture atlas if you're interested in using this as well. It's actually a sprite sheet. So if I open it up, that sprite sheet should give you all the images on one page, right? So if you're interested, if you want to do that, there's a big sprite sheet you can use. Pretty much this is just one sheet with all the images combined. Notice that there is one that's blank. That would be your blank, right? But more or less you have your banana, your bar, your bell, cherries, grapes, some kind of orange slice, and a 7. Right, these are all your fruits. Depending on what combination of fruits you get, then you either win or lose or whatever it's going to be. Then I've given you some simple buttons. So like a spin button with two, there's two states. So like kind of like the spin, and then when you press onto it, you get this state here. A button that changes from this to red when you touch it if you don't have enough money, right? So if you haven't bet enough, then it'll switch to this disabled state, right? A reset button, a power button that might take you to a start screen, and then of course a bunch of bet buttons. These are just bets, bet 1, bet 2, bets, and so on. Right now, you can make these larger, you can make them smaller, you can resize this thing, but your job is to kind of put things together in terms of how this is going to look. I've also provided you with, if I'm not wrong, a slot machine image for the background. So if I was going to look at that, it looks like this. Right, so I've kind of provided you with this. You don't have to use this, but I wanted to give you a kind of a way of kind of layering things on top. So you could have this in the background, all your buttons down here, let's say, or something like this, and then here are your reels. This is the area that you're going to actually display the images, right? So kind of a very straightforward assignment, not that difficult. And you probably kind of show your jackpot there, your total credits, the bet in there, and some kind of winners, winner paid in here, how much you got paid out. So I've given you this template. What I'd like you to do is, at the bare minimum, make your own if you can't use this one. It's not usable for you. So here's an example of what it looks like close up. So you might see that, for example, these might be too small for you to see on your device. So what I want, you may have to cut this apart and reshape it so that it makes sense for you, right? But at least I've given you something to work with that's clean, like there isn't a stock photo thing around it or whatever, so it can work, right? These are my images that I use for my stuff, so you can go ahead. And I modified these ones from the originals. Again, for educational purposes, you're perfectly fine with using this stuff. And I'm losing my mouse intermittently for whatever reason. Okay, so that stuff, that's the images that you're getting. Let me take a look at the web app. So again, if you, just gonna unzip this one. If you unzip it, if you download it and unzip it, now it is a Windows, a Visual Studio app, but it doesn't have to be. If you notice, there's an index.html. If you just double click the index.html, it should pull up this little page, right? So this is how it works. So this is the front end, a very simple web-based front end that I put together years ago, right? By the way, I'm not asking you to do this. This is just you testing the background logic. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, so the way it works is, let's say you bet 50, and you click the spin button, then it generates the results, blank, grapes, blank, and then blank would be, any kind of blank means you lost, right? So in this case, you lost, comes up, right? And if I click it again, you can see that my money will keep going down, right? And then it's blank, blank, blank. That's a total loss. Wow, that's rare too, to get 3 blanks, right? I'm really unlucky today, right? Let's keep spinning, right? So I'm gonna keep spinning. And you can keep testing it to see the logic, right? Right. Oh, blank, blank, blank. Yeah, I can't believe it. Second time in a row, blank, 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 right? And you can see how it works, right? So I've won some, I've lost some, right? Banana, orange. It's not bad, $100 there. You can see my money keep changing, right? And then if I click it enough times, it's going to show you your win ratio. I don't expect you to show these stats at all. One thing you could do if you want some bonus marks is inside of an optional screen or a second screen or whatever, you want to pull up some stats, like some button, like show me my stats. That's interesting. You want to try and show that kind of stuff. That's neat. But you can do that, and then, oh, I ran out of money, right? So some kind of notification that tells you ran out. Do you want to play a bit again? Yes, I do. And it resets me again. Okay, and if you notice, I keep spinning, and then it gives me some results, right? That's what this thing is, and it gives you the stuff down there. So how did I generate that? Very simple JavaScript code, very, very simple, right? So so that way you can test it out, and it's translatable very easily. It's one file to translate, main.js, right? Now you guys should all know JavaScript by now because you've been doing it with Przemek, right? So it's not something that's going to be out of this world difficult. If I was going to show you this thing, so look, I'm saving everything in variables. Look, the var keyword right now, you could take this as is and slap it into your code with nothing to do, right? Now this is very bad the way it's been written, but it's okay to get you going. It's okay. Then I don't care about this. This is just jQuery. But again, you've got this reset your fruit tally. And what I'm doing is, instead of searching for how many fruits are inside my string, right, an array, basically what I do is I create an array of kind of strings, right? So your bet line in the reals function, what it does is it generates an array of strings, right? And you also have an outcome array, and the outcome array keeps track of did you win or not, right? So the way it works is this: I have a check range method that I put inside of a switch case, right? Which is called, now this wouldn't work this way, the switch case. You may have to use an if else, right? If else, if else, if else, if, doesn't matter. But the logic behind it is right in here, this whole thing here. So basically what you're doing is you're checking between a number between a certain range, between 1 and 27, between 28 and 37, between 38 and 46, because at the end of the day, there's 65, we're emulating 65 different images on each of the reels, right? So it's 65 times 65 times 65 different kinds of combinations. So quite a few, right? 1 to 65. But there's a lot of the same ones. So for example, there's like 41% of each of the reels is blanks. That means there's a very high chance you're going to lose, right, when you play the game. By the way, these percentages are taken from actual simulations that are done with slot machines, right? So when you look at them, they're probably in that range, in the 40% range for each one of the slots, right? There's a chance that you're going to lose. That's what I'm saying. When you go to the casino, if you ever go to Woodbine Casino over here and pull a slot, or you use the one-arm bandit, and they're called that for a reason because most likely you're going to lose all your money, right? But that's why I'm not asking you to make a game of chance here, just to create an interface. And that's why I'm giving you some of the code, right? Very simple. You can figure this out, I'm sure. Then I also have something called determine winnings, where I calculate the tally. So I look at, so for example, if my blanks, the number of blanks that I got were 0, then that's good. That means you've won something, right? If I got a blank, then you didn't win anything. So it just skips over this. Could you do it differently? Absolutely. There's all kinds of ways of doing it without tallying. You can use regular expressions if you really want to do that, to search for in the string array to see how many you got, right? That might be a more elegant solution than this one, but I'm trying to keep it simple for you guys, right? So that it's not so difficult. Again, you calculate how many, what you tallied, and then at the end you come up with how many, what did you win and what did you lose, and then I kind of I go to the show message, the show win message if you win, and then the show loss message if you lost, right? The spin button itself that's working here is using a little bit of jQuery to kind of attach it to the click button, right? And what happens is every time the click button is clicked, then if the player money is 0, you can't obviously play. Otherwise, if the player bet is greater than the player money, you don't have enough money. If the player bet is less than 0, then you have to enter some kind of positive amount. So I check for a lower amount somehow. A little bit of validation, not much. And then if the player bet is less than or equal to the amount of money, so he has enough money or she has enough money, then they can play, and you can generate your spin result. Whatever that spin result is going to be, it's going to be just a string of, 3 strings. So blank, 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 or blank, grapes, cherry. And anytime you have a blank, you lost. If there's a blank that exists in any one of those combinations. That's it. It's very simple. So logic is there for you. You don't have to look around for it. Just an example of how it works. You want to modify it, go ahead. You don't want to use it, that's fine too. As long as your slot machine works at the end of the day, your functionality, I'm looking for that. All right, so that's what you got. So what I'd like you to do is, kind of go through it, check it out. There is no difficult stuff around this one. I mean, I've given you the assets, I've given you a bit of code, right, to kind of master. And then, by the way, like I said, JavaScript and Swift, like this JavaScript and Swift is almost like drag and drop. Like it's not like that difficult to do really at the end of the day, right? It's just attaching it to some image into your interface somehow. How do I attach my code so when I press the button it activates this function? That's what you have to figure out how to do with Sprite Kit. Questions about assignment number 3? Again, please don't try and conquer this on your own if you don't have to. If you got a partner you work with, I just want to repeat, work with that person, okay? It's not a 3-man job. It's a 2-man job at the most. This is not a big one, right? And I'm not looking for, functionality that's going to, hit this out of the park and it's going to make a brand new app that you're going to make millions from. Okay? It's not that kind of app, right? It's just an app to get you to practice using Sprite Kit. So no questions? You guys are good? Come on, you guys must have some kind of questions around this. I know it's hard. When you first get the assignment, you're like, I got to read it. I got to understand what I'm building here. The questions are going to come, guaranteed, right? And it's all going to be around, well, what happens when do you want me to do? And when a user does this, what happens? What did you want from us? Those kind of questions. But it's pretty straightforward if you think about it. This is not difficult stuff. You're laughing. Why are you laughing at me? Well, Margot, you got a question boiling. Not yet, she says. Okay. How about Jasmine in the back? Jasmine, you still doing a game? With a what? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But this one will be another one. Okay. So I'm trying to get you guys to practice, right? So I'm not asking you to do like your own. I'm asking you to do this one. Once you start going into your own, it's like capstone work, right? So or it's like a project work, and I don't want to make it that project. This isn't supposed to last more than a couple weeks, this thing. Okay. Remember, after this one, this is assignment 3. There's one more assignment after this, and that's it. right? Then you're done, right? So this one is due week 12. So today's week 10, means you get 2 weeks to get this done. This isn't a long time. Next week, I'm checking for your interface, see what the interface looks like. And the week after that, it's due. Like, that's how quick it's going to be, because we don't have a lot of time to make this really a polished work of art, okay? And really what you're doing here is you're making a prototype more than anything else, right? Like, you're just trying to, you know, kind of put things together to get you to get to have the idea of how these things work. All right, so last week, just to recap what we did last week, I'm just going to show you that for a few minutes, and we'll take a short break because it's already 7:20, believe it or not. So I'm going to pull up Xcode here, right, because we were working on that last week. So here's lesson 9. Okay, lesson 9. And what we were doing last week, we had this, we ended off with this collision manager. But let me show you what we got so far. So if I run this thing, and I'm going to run it with iPhone 6, now it's going to be it's going to run really slow, right? Because anytime you're in a simulator running something with Sprite Kit or Scene Kit, God, Scene Kit, it wouldn't even run, I guarantee you. And it's anything like that, it's really slow. And part of it's because, you know, you've got some vicious. This is what it looks like right now. Remember the plane? We drag our plane around, and we've got, collision. Let me just make it a little smaller for you so you can see it. So I'm going to scale this down a little bit. There we go. So you get your planes, and then you're running around here, and the clouds are coming down. This was all the stuff we did last week. And then when you kind of come over an island or a cloud, notice that it can detect which one I'm hitting right now. So if I go over this this cloud, that's cool. But if I go over the island, I also get that one, right? That's what we had last week when I left off. And I do have an example online, which we can refer back to. But what I'd like us to do is build up this this more and add things like sounds, that kind of stuff, just to see how all this works. One thing I should tell you about is the idea of the CheckCollision method. The CheckCollision method, which is part of the Collision Manager class that we created, right? If you notice, we had a pattern for the class, where we created start and update functions. I'm doing this on purpose, and I'll tell you why. If you learn the pattern that I'm showing you here, when you go and use Unity, it's the same pattern. So once you've learned this from a scripting perspective, and you look at Unity, the scripting pattern for Unity, when it comes to their game objects, same pattern, start and update, okay? So everything that happens in the start method, I want you to think about it as initialization, and when we build up our game, right? Which is what I want you to do with your slot machine, this new assignment that I gave you just now, right? So, so think about that. So think about all my initialization should happen in there for this particular class, right? My update method, this can be used to combine with the update that's part of our main class. So if you look at our play scene, right? At the bottom, you have an update method. The update method calls all the update methods of the game objects that I've created, right? So I've got my ocean sprite, my island sprite, my plane sprite. I've even got my collision manager, right, in here. My collision manager CheckCollision is a public static method. So remember, if I go back to my collision manager here, public and static, you can see that this thing here does not need to be instantiated. You don't need to create a new object of type collision manager, right? It's not required here. So public and static, right? And now the only thing we haven't checked here is, hey, okay, I've checked to see if my island is hit or my cloud is hit, and then all I'm doing is printing right now cloud or island from a demo or debugging perspective. That's all I'm doing here, right? And how did I do that? I created a super object last week, just to recap, called GameObject. So here's my GameObject, which is my super class, right? My super class for the objects that I'm making. Remember, we did this. And this GameObject is derived from our superclass Sprite Kit Sprite node, SK Sprite node, which is from Sprite Kit, right? Sprite node is just a sprite, which means our game objects have an is-a relationship. They are a sprite. Each one of them is a sprite, right? Which means we treat them as sprites. I've also created a game protocol for last week. Game protocol, remember, it's just like an interface in Java or in C#. That's what it is, which basically it gets us to use the reset, the check balance, the start, and the update methods. Each one of these must be there in order for the class to adhere to or comply with the game protocol, right? Now, this is just so everyone, sorry, my screen just went out. Everyone has the exact same way of writing our GameObject classes. That's what it's for. Is it required? Not really. If you just put all this stuff in there, that's all I've asked you to do, right? I've got two initializer methods, right? So there's one that's well, actually there's one initializer method. This is the constructor, right? And we need this initializer method because the default is we have to create a coder decoder, right? By default. Notice when I have NS, that's old Objective-C, which means we're, at the bare minimum, you must have something like this. It's required for you to make your own custom SK Sprite node class or object, right? So I've included a bunch of stuff here, like for example, they're a dy, dx, a height, width, and half height. I did all this last week, and they're all of CG float, CG being the core graphics floating point type, right? That's where they come from. So they have a special type here. And then in our constructor, we initialize our textures. We load our texture, which is basically loading up our image from individual objects. You could also use a Sprite Sheet. For this is why I supplied it. If you really want to try and do that, that's kind of a best practice for games. But you can certainly go ahead and do it this way as well. It's not going to bother me if you did it that way for your little game. Again, the name is an image string, the width and the height and half width and half height. All this stuff is what I've built up. Now, question for you. Could you use some of this code for your slot machine? Yeah, you kind of could, but it doesn't make sense. I mean, your slot machine is not going to fly around, right? So some of this stuff wouldn't be required, but you can use some of it as a pattern, right? For example, I don't know why this one's going out today a lot, but that one's fine and that one's fine. For example, maybe I'd want to have a reset method, right? Maybe I'd want to have a not check bounce, but start and update. That would definitely be in my slot machine, start and update, because that makes sense, right? So when I make my game object for my slot machine, I probably would do that, right? All right, so this is the superclass we talked about last week, game object. So that way, because I've done this, because all of my object, cloud, plane, and ocean, they're all type of game object. It doesn't matter which one I get, right? And I can compare the two. Did I collide, right? And again, here we're using something called distance checking. So basically, we have the distance formula, which I also created. I extended CG point last week, right? So this is just using the stuff we've been talking about. So if you look at, I wrote a little extension for that, which I call distance, right? And if you look at my code under my main project, I have something called distance right here. And what distance does, we use the extension type, right? Where we can, it's like a mixin, where I can kind of create my own little extension that extends CG points. So core graphics is a core graphic library, and I'm just extending something called CG point to add a distance function. And what this does, it kind of returns the distance between two CG points, point 1 and point 2. Why am I using distance checking? Because in this particular case, if I use AABB collisions, where I have, like, let's say I take two rectangles and compare them, and if they see the overlap, the problem with it is sometimes the visual collision doesn't happen, but meanwhile, because the rectangles, they've overlapped, so then there's a computational collision, and it's wrong. It looks weird, right? Because you're colliding, but you're not really colliding. So I'm using distance formula, distance checking for that, and I kind of showed you guys that last week in the video, how to do that. So I wrote this class as well, this little extension, right? And then, again, you've got your cloud, plane, and ocean, and each of these, other than the ocean, I think, is derived from the GameObject superclass, right? So if I look at, let's say, cloud inherits from the GameObject superclass that I wrote, right, with you guys. And then what I'm doing is I initialize the cloud with an image, so cloud. And then what I'm doing is I'm setting up the Z position, which is how this thing layers on top of each other. Because the Z position on Sprite Sheet, you're going to need this for your assignment number 3. Z position basically tells you how everything layers on top. So the lowest position could be like, let's say -1, and then you can go 0, 1, 2, 3, and then you can layer your sprites on top of each other so that you can create whatever visual effect you want. Okay, so that's really what this does, the cloud. And then I've noticed I've got my majors here, my reset, my check bounds, my start, and my update. These methods that are repeating, these are all required because I'm inheriting from GameObject, and GameObject adheres to the protocol that I defined, right? And here's the protocol, right? Protocol just basically says, hey, you need to have these methods. That's all it is. It's just an interface that forces you to use these things, right? When you inherit from GameObject, right? It's GameObject, you're inheriting from this class. So let's say, for example, going back to the cloud, you're inheriting from GameObject, and you must adhere to the protocol. And of course you do, right? Because you got reset, check bounce, start, and update. So that's what we did last week. We kind of put together these game objects. These are just the basic building blocks of the game, right? Where I have a plane, which is just my player that I move right and left with my finger, right? And then I have my ocean, which is the repeating background. And again, we talked about how it would scroll down. It would hit the top of my screen, then just reset. And so it's repeating. And same thing with everything. All my objects repeat. So I don't generate new objects every single time because that's wasteful, right? So I want you to think about it. How would I do this in a slot machine? If I was going to build my slot machine interface, right? Instead of me creating or instantiating new objects, I could just replace the texture, the image that appears in the slot machine. What do I mean by that? If I go back to my example assets, I'm going to pick my slot machine here again. So I'm going to just double click on my slot machine. Hopefully it won't shut down because I'm really taxing my system when so this is my slot machine. Yeah, it's always slowing down like this. But notice that if I zoom in here and let's say I'm building up my slot machine, right? And I'm also going to double click on some blanks. Blank. There's a blank. It's a blank image is all it is, a white, right? And I'm going to kind of put it in here. And you can see that where it goes, you can see that it looks like a blank. It's like perfectly sized for this thing. And then let's say, for example, I want to duplicate this one, right? So if I press, I think it's option. Yeah. And make another one. Now I've got 3 of them. Right, so you can see I've got 3 bitmaps. Now they're blanks in the middle. So if it comes up like this, obviously then it's a fail, right? But if, let's say, for example, the middle one's not a blank, right? The middle one happens to be, I don't know, 7, which is kind of the rarest one. Here's my 7. By the way, these are all GIF images. If you want to use my my images, you need to convert them to PNG images, PNG, or they won't be properly used inside of iOS. iOS likes to have PNGs as much as possible. Very easy to convert. Any program, if you go to Photoshop or Illustrator, any one of those things will convert your image from GIF to PNG, no problem, right? So that they're usable. So you can see how this works out. So depending on what it is, I'm only asking you to replace these images, right? So whatever, let's say, for example, this was some kind of image, bam, you replace it with this one, right? But if you want to do animation where the image kind of comes down like this and kind of comes into here, that's more challenging. How you do it, because you're going to have to cut this part out on the front, and then these images would actually be behind, and you might want to do half an image here and half an image down there and a full image up here, and so you kind of rotate things outside of the screen. And by the way, there's many other ways to do this thing. Much more difficult. If you really want to challenge, go ahead. I've done it before. It's not that difficult, but for this exercise, not required, right? All right, so that's what we kind of did last week. We kind of set up this game, and again, I showed you how it plays. So what I want to do today is I want to finish it off as much as I can with you, and what I want is I want to kind of get some sounds going. So how do I get the sounds going? I have to create a scoreboard for this stuff, and some images or fonts that come up to show you how things work in terms of calculating score, how to place fonts on the screen, how to use a custom font as opposed to the one that comes with the system, because that's really boring, right? And a bunch of other things like that. So those are the things we're going to be doing today. We're going to do it after the break, right? We're going to take 10 minutes or so everyone can get their coffee and have a smoke, call their mothers or whatever you want to do. and then afterwards we can continue. Okay? Any questions before we stop? So in this video, we talked about assignment number 3. That's where you're gonna have to be. You've been given assignment number 3 right now, and we've talked about kind of an update of what we did last week, just to kind of a review of what we. So you're kind of up to date with the stuff that we did in terms of code. Okay, we'll be back in about 10 minutes.